So I'll look to our clerk for roll call.
Your Worship, all members are present. Also in attendance for Councillor Laux is alternate Councillor Meadows, and I currently have Councillor Sandhu as absent.
Thank you. Does anybody have to leave early this evening that would affect the council meeting? I can't imagine. Okay. So I'll look for the approval of agenda. Councillor Dolan, if you would, please. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Leduc that the agenda for the May 23rd, 2023 meeting of County Council be approved.
Okay, we've all heard the motion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? I can't imagine. That is carried. Do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of council? Okay, not seeing any. So as I mentioned before, we've got a wonderful presentation today on our paramedic services. May 21st to 27th is National Paramedic Services Week, the perfect opportunity to celebrate the exceptional first responders who serve our communities. There is an open house today in the atrium to celebrate this, and I encourage those who are here today to go out and check it out. This year's theme is Diversity in Paramedicine. We'll focus on the diverse needs of patients, the unique experiences and skills of our providers, and the many opportunities that exist within the profession. As we've all seen time and time again, our County of Simcoe Paramedic Services play a vital role in caring for our residents and visitors in their times of need. And their impact goes far beyond emergency medical services, carrying through the many community programs that they provide throughout our municipalities. On behalf of all of us on County Council and the residents we represent, thank you to our paramedic services staff for everything you do to support and care for our community. I'll now invite Sarah Mills, Director and Chief, County of Simcoe Paramedic Services, to present the Paramedic of the Day contest winner. Oh, go
Good
ahead,
morning.
Jane, whenever you're ready, Director.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. As we celebrate Paramedic Services Week and this very, very special event this morning, it is my pleasure to introduce your Director and Chief of Paramedic Services, Ms. Sarah Mills.
Good morning, everyone. I really hope everyone had a nice long weekend, some nice weather. So today is day 3 of Paramedic Services Week, which is an annual opportunity to recognize and reflect upon the hard work and dedication that paramedics across the country have, the hard work and dedication of paramedics across the country. Each year, the County of Simcoe Paramedic Services selects a grade 5 or 6 student from the area to join us as an honorary paramedic for a day. This year is the first year back in person since 2019. We can't begin to tell you how excited we are to welcome this year's recipient, Danica Smith, to join us for the day. Our Simcoe County Paramedic Services Honor Guard is here today to escort Danica into council chambers and to begin the ceremony. Honor Guard, please escort our paramedic for the day in. So it's my pleasure to introduce Chantal Demers, our Manager of Logistics, and our Paramedic for a Day recipient, Danica Smith, who is a grade 6 student from Sunnybrae Public School in Stroud. And I'd like to turn your attention to the video screens. Do I have to do that? Is someone going to key it up? Oh. This is Danica's submission for the contest, which she was selected as the winner. So great job.
I'm going to be putting Rome in the sling, okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Is Rome okay in that position?
Yeah, it's fine.
Jeff, she needs to be put on the stretcher. She can't walk. Come help me.
All I have to say is poor Elsa. She was in rough shape there. Great job on the video. Welcome to Paramedic Services for the county. We hope you have an excellent day. And on that, Honor Guard, please escort our honorary paramedic to her duties. So on behalf of our entire team, we would like to thank you for participating and welcoming to Danica to join us for the day. We would like to invite you to join us out in the atrium for having an open house. As you see, our vehicles are everywhere. It is not an emergency. It's just for show. But we want to showcase our skills. We're having, many of our different areas, many of our different programs available for information and just a quick chat if you'd like it. So thank you very much and happy Paramedic Services Week.
So thank you, Sarah, and congratulations to Danica, which leads right into the proclamation. I will now read the Paramedics of the Week proclamation. Whereas paramedic services in Ontario are a vital public service, and whereas members of paramedic service teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas the paramedic services in Ontario recognize the role support staff play a meeting that is vital to the public service. And whereas access to quality emergency and supportive health care dramatically improves the survival, recovery rate, and the quality of life of those who experience sudden illness or injury. And whereas the members of the paramedic services team, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of all the paramedic service providers by designating Paramedic Services Week. Therefore, I, Warden Basil Clark, on behalf of the Simcoe County Council, do hereby proclaim the week of May 21st to 27th, 2023 as Paramedic Services Week, with the theme Diversity in Paramedicine, the patient, the provider, the profession. I request all communities in the County of Simcoe to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Thank you. And now I'll move on to our consent agenda and ask Councillor Burkett if he would present the motion.
Morning, Your Worship, through you. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Norcross, that the Council Communications and Proclamations May 9th, 2023 to May 22nd, 2023 have been given due consideration be received.
All heard the motion. I think on the one communication, it mentions the May 18th bus tour, which I believe was canceled. So we'll have to revise those minutes. So all in favor? That is carried. An adoption of council minutes, Deputy Warden Coughlin.
Thank you, Warden. Moved by myself and seconded by alternate Councillor Meadows, that the following council minutes be confirmed and adopted, and the Committee of Whole reports be confirmed. County Council minutes, May 9th, 2023, Committee of the Whole report, May 9th, 2023, and Committee of the Whole confidential report, May 9th, 2023.
Questions on the minutes? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And now we'll do the presentation and consideration of Committee of the Whole report. We'll start with Chairman Cox.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Evans, that the performance management recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated May 9th, 2023 be approved, including the confidential report.
Any items to be pulled? All in favor of the motion? That is carried. Next, Chair Leduc.
Thank you, Warden. We're at 9.2, Committee Whole Report, Human Services, May 9th, 2023. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDonald, that the Human Services recommendations contained within the Committee of Whole Report dated May 9th, 2023 be approved.
Any comments? Anything to be pulled? No. All in favor? That is carried. And lastly, Chair Dolan, if you would do Corporate Services, please.
Thank you, Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Measures, that the Corporate Services recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated May 9th, 2023 be approved, including the confidential item and with the exception of the delegated authority item.
On that motion, any to be pulled? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Presentation and consideration of special committee reports, we have none, and presentations and considerations of county officers report, and we do have one today. So I'll look for a mover, moved by Councillor Bell, second by Councillor Miskimans, that item CO 2023-146 dated May 23rd, 2023, being an update on the proposed provincial planning statement be received, and that the county planning submit comments to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing through the Environmental Registry of Ontario, posting number 019-6813, as outlined in report CO 2023-146. Any comments on that report? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Notices of which notice has been given. Do I have any notices of motion? Councillor Measures, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Good morning, members of County Council. I do have a notice of motion I'd like to bring forward, and at the conclusion of reading this lengthy motion, Your Worship, I will be asking for a waiving of the procedural bylaw in order to deal with this motion today. I hope that that would be acceptable to the House. Okay, members. Whereas the Honourable Stephen Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, stated in relation to Bill 112, the dissolution of Peel Region, that in the coming weeks, the province will also name regional facilitators to assess the upper-tier municipalities of Durham, Halton, Niagara, Simcoe, Waterloo, and York. These facilitators will be tasked with reviewing whether the upper-tier government continues to be relevant to the needs of its communities, or whether the lower-tier municipalities are mature enough to pursue dissolution. Where they recommend that a two-tier government is still required, the facilitators will also make recommendations on how they can more effectively respond to the issues facing Ontario's fast-growing municipalities today, particularly when it comes to meeting municipal housing pledges and tackling the housing crisis. And whereas the County of Simcoe has previously requested that a facilitator be assigned to assist in efficiencies and supporting a review of service specific to ensuring that the provincial goal of constructing 1.5 million new housing units in the next 10 years can be achieved. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Simcoe County Council, made up of the mayors and deputy mayors of the member municipalities, believe strongly in the tiered governance composition, structure, and the current state of maturity of the municipalities supported by the County of Simcoe that delivers tremendous essential services and benefits our residents of Simcoe County, and that pursuing the dissolution of Simcoe County should be absolutely not be a consideration of the provincial facilitator, and that the staff be directed to work with the Province of Ontario on the appointment of a facilitator whose scope of work will focus on identifying more evolved municipal service delivery models within the County of Simcoe that ensure effective and efficient support for future growth in the region, and that the province respectfully ensures that there is increased and meaningful communication directly with the County of Simcoe on all matters pertaining to the future of Simcoe County, and that this resolution be forwarded to the Honourable Stephen Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Your Worship, I would like to move this motion. I will leave it to you to call for a seconder if anyone wishes to do so. And then at that point, I would like to ask for the motion to waive the procedure bylaw. Your Worship.
I have a seconder in Councillor McDonald, and I guess the next way we would go, I will defer to the clerk. We will now need a motion to waive the procedure bylaw if we want to vote on this notice of motion today. And I believe I need 2/3 majority to do that. So, do you have a motion? Or I just oh, that is the motion. So I'll need a mover and a seconder to waive the procedure bylaw. Moved by Councillor Mike Smith, second by Councillor Brian Smith.
Thank you.
So questions on waiving the procedure bylaw? Everybody understands why we need to do that. So I will call the vote. All in favor? I do have 2/3 majority. So is there anything you would like to add to your notice of motion, Councillor Measures, and we can vote on that today?
All right. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Members, this has been something that sort of surprised me. I was away to the United States over the weekend and learned of the announcement that was made by Minister Clark. And I understand where he's going when it comes to Peel Region. I want to point out that, as I pointed out in my motion, that Simcoe County did ask for a facilitator to help us work with, through issues of efficiencies and service delivery for all of our municipalities. And I think that this motion has a lot of detail in it. Again, I apologize for it being lengthy. I do want to acknowledge that yesterday afternoon, on a holiday Monday, I was very grateful that the staff, the CAO and Rob Elliott were able to assist, help me put some actual text down on this, so appreciate their input. Thank you.
Any other comments on the motion? Pretty straightforward, like everything it says. Councillor Gordon, and then Councillor Hamlin, and then I've got some hands at the front table here as well.
Thank you very much. I'm sure, as the rest of you, I'm equally concerned with, the sort of arbitrary nature that watching Peel get deconstructed, on a whim, without any plan in place for compensation and lots of question marks. But that is kind of common to what we're experiencing through the province lately. They release something virtually overnight with next to no consultation, and then there's nothing that follows suit. All the regulations that try and explain how things like Bill 23, how do we bill our development charges, at what rate are we going to be made whole, smaller municipalities, what is our actual number of homes that are supposed to be built, county's given a number, but how are we being held to that number? There's just so many questions. We don't understand how any of this is going to work. And now the notion or the suggestion that perhaps Simcoe County could fall under the hatchet as Peel did, and a bunch of these small municipalities certainly lack the wherewithal and capacity to manage all the services the county does on our own. It makes no sense whatsoever. So I'm waiting for the make sense part to come from the province. But my only concern with this motion, and I could go on at length about some of the other issues with what's going on from our partners at the province, it just makes my head swim. And just for absolute clarity, I'm a card-carrying PC, and I'm just struggling with some of the bizarre way that our province is choosing to do things. Anyway, the one request on here that pursuing the dissolution of the County of Simcoe should absolutely not be a consideration of the provincial facilitator. I can't imagine anybody submitting a motion like this wouldn't have this in here, but I don't know if it really needs to be in here. We can put it in if we want, but at the end of the day, we're creatures of the province. They'll do as they will. And I just think that it kind of dilutes the message that we're really a good standalone service, and we welcome the opportunity to be weighed and measured yet again from the province, even though the last time they chose not to publish the results. But I just think if we removed that one line, trying to take it completely off the table, I just think that this motion may stand, or maybe not raise the eyebrows of the province when we send it to them, because it is their mandate to look and to see whether dissolution is required or warranted. And I think putting that in there makes it look like we're circling the wagons and we don't want to be weighed and measured and put under the microscope. And I think we welcome that because of the fantastic caliber of staff and the quality of service we deliver in the county, value for the money. So my only suggestion, and I won't make it an amendment just at this point because I'd like others to have a chance to talk, would be that we maybe remove that line because it's a little presumptuous, and I think we all know that that is the goal, is to look and see whether or not there's worth, and us saying that they should take it off the table just may, it may be unnecessarily adversarial when what we're trying to do is get the province on board with us.
Okay, good comments. I have lots of hands. I'll go to Councillor Hamlin. I'm writing them down, then I've got a few. I see you, Councillor Meadows and Capel. So go ahead, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Warden. I'm not in support of this motion. Like all in this House and all of us who represent their local councils across our county, we want to deliver the most efficient and cost-effective services to our community and provide a strong foundation for our future. I'm not afraid to lift up the lid on the box and look inside. And if that's what the province, again, wants to do for our county, I think, why not? Maybe there's a better way of doing it. And about the dissolution of the county, maybe at the end, I'll just throw this out there, as we know it, it gets dissolved and reformatted in a different way. We have a number of smaller communities that really need the services that the county provides. I don't know about Collingwood, and of course I'm the mayor of Collingwood. In some ways, and I'll just give land use planning as an example, we're growing into the town of Blue Mountain. And if I have to be honest, I think that we should be doing our land use planning with the town of Blue Mountain because it's not making sense right now. And our transportation networks should be to the west, in addition to the east and south. Luckily, we have the bay on the north. Don't have to worry about that. But, I want to seek the input from our professional staff on this issue. I don't know what's the best way for us, but I wouldn't be prepared at this time to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dolan, did you have your hands up? I saw some right across the table here. So.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I did have some questions, and I'm cognizant of the fact that this is an emotional issue for everyone, but I'm also cognizant of my fiduciary duty to the County of Simcoe as I sit in this House. And so I would ask either CAO Aiken or General Manager Elliott to speak to the motion as is written. I tend to agree with Councillor Gordon that it is a little bit, that one line is a little bit acrimonious, and again, confident enough that none of us are capable of supporting waste management, waste collection, paramedic services, long-term care, and social housing, that we can open up to the province and show them that. But I'd be just interested in the take from either Jim Elliott or CAO Aiken.
I'll start with you, CAO. Go ahead.
Certainly I can begin, and maybe Mr. Elliott can follow up. Difficult situation, and to Councillor Gordon's point, why did it happen in Peel? I think a lot of it happened in Peel because of the political landscape of Peel. Peel was a county back in the late 60s, early 70s, and amalgamations occurred in Mississauga and Brampton, as you know, have politically been quite astute that they felt that the time for the region was over. I think the point of this resolution in terms of the clause that was mentioned and asked about is, does this House, does County Council continue to support this corporation and the services that we provide? versus the differences that occurred in Peel, where I think Mississauga and Brampton maybe were not so, in terms of the evolution of themselves as large cities, not so much in support of the services that Peel provided in the fashion in which they were provided. So I think that's the purpose, I think, of that particular clause, is to let the province know that as mayors and deputy mayors and as county councillors, that's something that maybe you're not in consideration of at this particular time, but again, that's up to county council. In terms of the planning piece, maybe Rob, you can talk a little bit about, what happened on Thursday in terms of Bill 112 and where we're at with that, because I think as it points out, Bill 112 is aimed particularly at Peel. The regional facilitators, you recall, in Bill 23, we weren't originally included in this, and perhaps we were only included because Simcoe County Council did pass a resolution asking that a facilitator be assigned specifically to look at service delivery. Obviously, dissolution wasn't on the page at that time, and I think that was the point of the mover of the motion. So, Rob?
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Your Worship. You've rightfully pointed out, CAO again, that when this whole notion of a facilitator came up, it was first introduced through Bill 23, which was the More Homes Faster Act. And that was the legislation that introduced the notion that upper-tier municipalities, being the regions, and the county of Simcoe being the only county named in that, would not have responsibility for planning approvals or an official plan. Subsequent to that, Bill 39 was introduced, which is about the Better Municipal Government Act, and that was the one that actually suggested the 5 regions would have a facilitator, but Simcoe County was unmentioned. And it was at that point that this House asked for a facilitator to be appointed. So our belief at that point was to understand how to evolve the planning function to make sure we could support the additional housing requirements of the province at the time. I don't think at anybody's wildest imagination there was a thought of this legislation leading towards the dissolution of any level of government. And as CAO Aiken has pointed out, the level of growth and the pressures facing the county are quite a bit different than those of Peel Region. They are 2 very strong and mature municipalities. They've got planning departments of 60 or 80 people each. They're merging into one another. They've only got 3 municipalities to deal with. So I think the complexities and the intermunicipal relationships that we have to build, foster, and maintain are quite different here than they are in Peel Region. So the concern is that the idea of dissolving the county would be quite a distraction and would actually keep us from actually doing that essential good work that has to be done in the years ahead. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Leduc.
Yes, thank you, Warden. I cannot support the resolution as written. I think it's premature right now. We did ask for a facilitator up here at the county, and I'll tell you, this is my 9th year here, and I have fought to change the governance structure at the county for those 9 years. I think it's something we need to review, and I can tell you that I don't think this is all about dissolution of the county. We're not Halton, we're not Peel, we're not Durham, we're a county. I don't think we can stand on our own when it comes to separated cities. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is premature. I think it's a good thing that we can review. The Burke report was printed in 2010. It talked about the restructuring of the county council. We have sat on that one. 2002, Barry put out a report about county council. That's gone nowhere. So we've had many opportunities to change the structure of this governance, and we have been unable to do it as a group. To me, this is somewhere where I think that's why we asked for the facilitator in that motion back at Bill 23 to bring in a facilitator to look at the governance structure here up at the county, because there is ways to be more efficient from a municipal point of view. The county of Simcoe is something that I think we can stand behind. I certainly can stand behind the county of Simcoe being an upper tier government, but I think there is more restructuring that has to be done at the municipal level. We are 135, I think, members of municipal people in a population of under 500,000. And I think Niagara Falls said the same thing. The mayor of Niagara Falls said the same thing. He's 126 members in a small population of 300,000. So to me, there is opportunities for review and efficiencies. This is not about dissolution. I think there is certainly opportunities here to have the facilitator. So I will not support this because we're just premature with this one. I think there's opportunities for us to get better as a whole county. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and alternate Councillor Meadows. Welcome back.
Thank you. I was concerned when I read about this. I totally agree with that line that's in there that pursuing the dissolution of the County of Simcoe should absolutely not be consideration of the provincial fact. I also went through the times when we were told to look at bettering our county here. Some of the stuff was ignored. I totally agree. But we all win as a county. We all lose if we're not. We've all paid into certain things like the regional airport. What's going to happen with that? I'll tell you what's going to happen. It's going to go back to the town of Barrie because that's written right in the contract. All that money we put into that piece of real estate is now gone. And my municipality is not going to benefit from it. We all benefit from being together. And all I see that's going to end up happening here is another power grab by the provincial government. And we're all going to be either amalgamated to make us smaller and less powerful, and that's exactly what they want. We have power here because of the fact that we're united as municipalities. This is the County of Simcoe. I totally agree with this going forward, because without it, we're nothing. And you want to see tax increases? We just had the biggest one in our whole history. We're going to have higher ones. So I fully support this motion going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Warden. I guess just a couple of comments. The first one being, I did follow this as much as everybody else likely did. And at the beginning, they did include Simcoe County. So I would definitely want some clarification, because the last few stories that I read with respect to this, they did not identify in those stories Simcoe County. So, hey, I'd like to make sure that we were included in it. And secondly, I think it's a bit emotional. And also, I'm quite leery of pushing this button, to be quite frank with you. You know, I don't want to be poking the bear. We've come to the council meeting today, and this is pretty quick, pretty fast. And unfortunately, I don't think I'd be able to support it today. Given that fact, I think might be in our best interests to possibly put this off just a little bit longer and see exactly where the provincial government is headed with this. To be quite frank, I'd rather have them a little bit more placated towards our needs as a municipality and as a county than have them see this as an adversarial type of motion directing them to leave us alone. So I guess on the first point there, if somebody could just clarify that Simcoe County is definitively included in this and identified in it as well. Thank you.
Okay. I have Councillor Sandhu.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand and respect the intent of this motion, but I can't support it. I was so proud of this House and my colleagues when we showed leadership, when we passed a resolution authorizing the warden and the CAO to go to the province and ask for a facilitator. It looks like now we're shying away from this by saying, don't break us. We're the creatures of the province. Whether this is there or not, they can do as they wish. I say we let them come in. If we're so confident that all of our ducks are in the row, why worry about it? And if that time comes, we deal with it. Right now, in my mind, this is premature. And I do have an issue with that wording, that paragraph that everyone's talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Measures.
First of all, thank you very much, Your Worship. But also thank you to the members that speak, because I think it's very important that all members have an opportunity to speak about this. Each of you are leaders in your own communities, and you're also leaders here across this county. And so I absolutely appreciate and respect all of your comments. Councillor Dolan mentioned acrimonious sort of tone to this. I do not believe that's an acrimonious tone, and yet I do think it's time for some clarity, and we need to deliver a clear message to our colleagues in the province to let them know that this House made up of leaders have a comment that they'd like to speak. And I think it's a clear message that we're trying to deliver. It's delivered in a respectful manner, and there's no acrimonial statements towards that. Councillor Leduc and Cabral, I would I agree with you when you both say that you think it's a little premature, and I think Mr. Sandu, you said the same. But the issue I have is that I think that this motion needs to be brought forward now, as the actions from the province, they don't give us any time to think about it. They pop out and deliver them to us at untimely hours, like a Thursday before a holiday weekend. So I think this is a great opportunity for this House and this governance model to present a message back to the province, given that we can demonstrate that we can be nimble and react as quickly as to these announcements as well. And so I think it's it's a bit of a balance here in taking some understanding of what the issues really are. We do need to, each of us in our own municipalities, consider the services and perhaps, to your point, Mr. Leduc, the number of members of each municipality's political house. That is something that should be considered. I don't mind advising you that last term, as I was the mayor at last term at Clearview, we did exactly that. We reduced from 9 to 7 members. And in fact, there was a talk about perhaps reducing to even 5. But the point is that at this time we've moved from 9 to 7. That's our municipality. I know each of you can look at your own municipalities and make those type of decisions with your residents and citizens and hear from them. So I think, again, to the point about this being premature, this is a good opportunity for this House to speak as leaders about the issues, to seek out the facilitator to work with us to deliver more efficient services and find ways that we can work with the province and our lower tier municipality governments in a much more efficient way. Your Worship.
Thank you. The only thing I'll add to that motion myself is not add to the motion. I'm going to add my support to it. If you remember, we weren't assigned a facilitator. This House asked for one, and I see no reason why, since we're asking for the facilitator, we can't help structure why that facilitator's here. It's something we've requested. We should be able to lay out some of the parameters on why they're here. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just going back when we first had the minister send two people from his ministry up here to talk to each municipality, and through that came our RGR committee, which we did take back to our own municipalities and did put some of that stuff into place, which is right to that where it's the facilitator. But we did that. So we're one step ahead to give that information to the facilitator for the efficiencies. And out of that came that they wanted smaller municipalities with numbers on their council. They wanted us to find efficiencies working as partners with other municipalities, and many of us have done that. And then it became another election and COVID, so it didn't do that. But we have had a lot of discussion, a lot of good things come out of that committee, and I think that the facilitating part of this that Councillor Measures has put in the paragraph is absolutely the same thing that we were trying to do, only they will have another outside eye looking at it. So I am in support of this. I do thank everyone for their comments, but I still will support this because I think that what we're here to do is find efficiencies in our governance, and which, if it comes from the county, it will flow down to our municipalities and everyone will have what they need. And that's what we had ended up with at our RGR. So thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Is there any, Councillor Compton and then Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Your Worship. It reminds me a couple of weeks ago when we were at Casino Rama, where we're in a transitional phase of change. But the issue that we're looking at is, what is the criteria, the evaluation process of the uniqueness of Simcoe County as compared to other areas in Ontario? I think we need to look at what is going to be proposed and how it impacts the municipalities in the county. The issue is that wait and see, and hopefully we can transform into the given situation. We don't have enough answers, and we have to ask the facilitator to provide this before making any decisions. And it's not being premature, or I think we're just being proactive in terms of how we address the concerns of this county, because that's going to be the future. Knowing the province, just reading over through the history, it's perhaps a downloading of situation where there are opportunities for the province, but what's to give back in terms of the county. So I think I prefer to wait and see to get the information before making a decision to either move forward with it as proposed, but I think we need to address the concerns and issues that are coming forth.
Thank you. Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Warden. I'm in support of the motion. This province has shown a propensity for moving much too quickly on things, so I think it's important to send messages quickly to them as well. Brampton's reaction to the Peel announcement shows that there's little predetermination about how it's going to work. They're voicing their concerns. I think it's important in my role as a county councillor to continue to promote the idea of facilitation, to look at solutions for Simcoe County, and so I'm going to be in support of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Measures? Meadows, I'm sorry.
Meadows.
Sorry, Bob.
No, I was going to reiterate what the councilman over there just said. This government has a tendency to bulldoze everything forward without thought. Bill 97 is one of those bills that's going forward, whether we like it or not. It's already going for the second reading on that. Bill 23 was another prime example where it was all done on holidays. It seems to be a pattern with this government, and I'm a diehard conservative, always have been, but I shake my head at some of the stuff that's been going on, and it's not benefiting our communities. There seems to be some sort of special thing going on here, some changes that we're not privy to, but I'm not for this, and I totally agree with this motion going forward.
Thank you. Is there any other comments on the motion? We had a great discussion. Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to hear all the comments, and it's a great thing, but I believe...
I was going to say, I don't think
there we go.
On.
That's better. I liked all the comments. I like what everybody has had to say, but I believe it's time for us to be on offense instead of defense. I think it's better for this House to come forward and say this is what we're looking for. We're not asking for anything bad. We're not asking to pick a fight. We just want to say that this is a good resolution. It has everything that we need in it. We're looking for a facilitator, and we're asking them to start off on our footing as opposed to us waiting for the province to say this is what you're left with. So I like the idea of us playing offense rather than defense.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much, Your Warden. I have a couple comments on this. First of all, the thing that strikes me on Thursday when I was listening to this was this is a solution to a problem that's in Peel region. And I started thinking about it. I'm going, well, you know, Simcoe, what is the difference? Is Simcoe Peel? And I look at the regions that are in, and that the government is looking to implement this type of strategy. And I don't agree with that. Simcoe is different than Peel. We have a lot of issues that are unique to Simcoe, and I'm sure the other regions may have them as well. And I started thinking about what is our role in municipal government? Well, of course, we're alive because of the virtue of the provincial government, but we're also here to do their best business. We're acting in the best interest of not just the county, but our townships and our cities as well. So I see no issue with the proclamation that we have here today. It seems like nobody's mentioned that the provincial government has reached out to anybody here and explained what's going on. And if this is the form of communication that they want to use, I think it should be done in the spirit of fellowship and cooperation, which I believe this represents.
And we have to look again at what's the best interest of the county and the township. And I think that's what the provincial government wants us to do. That's why we're here. We're here because we have to represent our unique wishes. And I see no issue with us having a communication like this that reiterates why we are here. We're willing to work with them. We're willing to help make the county better and look at opportunities for synergies and growth in the future. But, speaking from a smaller township in the area, I don't look at it just as where we are right now. I think we have to look at it also in the future. How do we in our small communities that don't even have water or septage solve these problems? It's just a good example of this is a bigger issue than just housing. This is a future issue of our whole communities as we grow and we expand. And I believe that if this is the way that we're going to be given information, that we should reply in kind. And by not doing it, I don't think we're representing the wishes of the people we represent. Thank you, Warden.
Thank you. So you sparked a good discussion here, Councillor Measures. Any other comments? Councillor Smith, Brian Smith.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. You may have heard me say this before. There's two things we all hate: change in the way things are. And what I'm hearing in this House is that we really don't know, are we changing or are we staying the same? And so that's a real conundrum, in my opinion. It's often not what you say, it's how you say it that matters. And I think that this motion says it fairly clearly. I don't think it uses any language that should concern the province. I think the provincial government is a government that is committed to making many changes that many other governments in the past maybe weren't willing to do. But what I do know is that if we don't tell them what we think and how we feel today, they don't know. And we hear this from our residents in our communities every day, that I didn't know or I didn't want that. And I look to this House and is there a single politician in this House today who hasn't at one time said or wanted to say to a resident, well, we didn't know you didn't like it because you didn't say anything. So I don't think we're being degrading or disrespectful. I think we're simply doing what we are elected to do, and that is stand up for our own separate municipalities, and in this House for the County of Simcoe. And I can tell you that my experience with the County of Simcoe has been nothing but positive. I think the County of Simcoe does great things for our municipalities, and quite frankly, I think without the County of Simcoe, the vast majority of the municipalities in this county are in big trouble. And so at the end of the day, again, the province doesn't know we're not happy if we don't tell them so. And yes, we may have asked for a facilitator in the past and we didn't get one, so then it's our job to ask again. So I fully support this as it's written. I commend Councillor Measures for bringing this forward today. And I would ask that other members in the House do the same and support this. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further comments? Councillor Duke.
Not a comment, Your Warden, just a recorded vote, please, when you call the vote.
Okay, so we'll be looking for a recorded vote, and I'm seeing no other hands, so then I will call the vote. Mr. Clerk.
Your Worship and members, Councillor Duke has requested a recorded vote on the notice of motion introduced by Councillor Measures, seconded by Councillor MacDonald. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote, yea or nay, starting with Councillor Leduc.
Nay.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yay.
Councillor McClellan.
Nay.
Councillor Measures.
Yay.
Councillor Miskimmins.
Yay.
Councillor Norcross.
Nay.
Councillor Norris.
Yay.
Councillor Rawson.
Yay.
Councillor Sandhu.
Nay.
Councillor Brian Smith.
Yay.
Councillor Michael Smith.
Yay.
Councillor Snell. Councillor Van Stavern.
Yay.
Councillor Walker.
Yay.
Councillor Anderson.
Anderson.
Sorry. Yay. Councillor Bell.
Yay.
Councillor Burkett.
Yay.
Councillor Cabral.
Nay.
Councillor Clonton.
Nay.
Deputy Warden Coughlin.
Yay.
Councillor Cox.
Yay.
Councillor Dolan.
In favor.
Councillor Evans.
Yay.
Councillor Fowler.
Yay.
Councillor Fryer. Yes. Councillor Gordon.
Nay.
Councillor Greenlaw.
Yay.
Councillor Hamlin.
Nay.
Councillor Locks, or Councillor Meadows.
Yay.
Councillor LaRose.
Yay.
Councillor Lavoie.
Nay.
Your Worship.
In favor.
Your Worship, that's 23 in support, 9 opposed.
Motion carries. Thank you. Sparked a good discussion there, Councillor Measures. So next I will move, that was our notice of motion, so closed session, we have none. Consideration of bills, we have none. So we do have some announcements. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Aline Miller, Corporate and Municipal Records Archivist, recipient of the Archives Association of Ontario Alexander Fraser Award. This award was presented to individuals who have contributed in a significant way to the advancement of the archival community in Ontario. Since joining the county in 1995, Elaine has and continues to demonstrate exceptional knowledge and professionalism, having mentored countless archivists and heritage professionals from co-op students to co-workers. Congratulations to Elaine. And now I've got a whole list. As a friendly reminder, there's some upcoming events and meetings. Following the Committee of the Whole today, County Council will participate in a county planning workshop. There is also an electric vehicle show being held in the parking lot from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., which allows everyone to learn about the benefits and transitions to EVs. Information into owning and operating an EV in Simcoe County, and I believe test drives are available as well. No brake burns in our parking lot, please. June 8th is the 17th Annual Wardens Gala in support of the United Way. Simcoe Muskoka is being held at the Nottawasaga Inn Resort. And our June 13th, you know, today is the day I officially need reading glasses. I'm really struggling up here to read this. I'll make it. I'm close. Strategic Planning Session Part 1 will be held following the Council Committee of the Whole, which I mentioned, but the Strategic Planning Session Part 2 will be held on June 27th, following the Committee of the Whole. And lastly, and most importantly, Councillor Michael Smith needs your support at the FCM. As you know, he's running for chair. So when's the date of the FCM, Mike?
Runs Thursday to Sunday. The election's on Sunday.
And the election is on Sunday, so everybody there, you must be there in person. Stick it out to Sunday afternoon to support our local councillor. I really look forward to him being on that committee. Well, keep your fingers crossed. Any other announcements? I'm not seeing any, so I will see where I'm at here. Confirmatory bylaw, Councillor Norcross.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you, moved by myself, second by Councillor Burkett, that Bill number 7013-23 be enacted as a bylaw of the County of Simcoe.
Everybody's heard the motion. All in favor? That is carried. And now I'll look for a motion that the May 23rd, 2023 meeting of County Council be adjourned at 9:56. Alternate Councillor Meadows, will you move that for me? Second by Councillor Van Stavern. All in favor? That is carried. And why don't we break until 10:10 and then we'll come back for our committee of the whole.
Please rise. At 10 to 10. Is it not 3 to 10?
think my ears are still ringing from running the chainsaw.
Okay. I want to welcome the city reps. They're here to join the committee of the whole, so I'll go back to my clerk and look for attendance.
Your Worship, from County Councillor, Councillor Locks sends his regrets. In his place, alternate Councillor Meadows. In attendance from Aurelia, we have Councillor Durnford. Aurelia, Councillor Fallis. Barrie, Councillor Hamilton is absent. Aurelia, Mayor McIsaac. Barrie, Councillor Ngusi. Barrie, Mayor Nuttall is absent. Barrie, Councillor Riepma is in attendance. And you have your quorum, sir.
Thank you. With that, I'll look for approval of the agenda. And Councillor Dolan, if you've got, always catch you doing something.
Your Worship, you always catch me when I'm not paying attention. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Cox that the agenda for the May 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Committee of the Whole be approved.
Everybody's heard the motion. All in favor? That is carried. Do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of council? I didn't see anything on the agenda that I thought would. So presentations and delegations, we actually have Don Hipwell here, Director of Procurement, Fleet and Property, and Yule Herbert, Principal and Founder Director, SSG. Provide an opportunity for the committee members to ask questions on the following presentation, which is our Climate Action Plan. So Don, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Worship, and happy to be back, chairs and council. We were here on April the 25th with the first part of this presentation, you may recall, and we're happy to be back today. We have Mr. Yule Herbert here, Principal and Founding Director of SSG, who we're working with since last fall on the county's Climate Action Plan. Just to refresh on our timeline, so we did complete our inventory of our GHGs. The results were presented on the 25th. We are back today to do part 2 of the climate action planning presentation, and we will be coming back in the fall with our recommended reduction target and our corporate climate action plan for your approval, and then we will proceed with implementation ongoing. So this time I'll hand it over to Mr. Herbert for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. I work with a workers' cooperative called Sustainability Solutions Group. We're about 40 people spread out across Canada, US, and Chile. And we've been working on climate action plans for about 20 years for almost all the major municipalities in Canada, including a couple you see here, the region of Peel, and also, which was the subject of the earlier debate. And also another example here is for the Government of Canada and all of their assets in the National Capital Region, which is about 2,000 buildings serving about 150,000 people. And so our work is really to identify effective, efficient ways to decarbonize major organizations. I'm going to take you through a few charts, and this is really to acclimatize you to what you will see when you think about greenhouse gas emissions. And this is one of the key outputs that summarizes many aspects of a climate action plan. On the left hand, or the y-axis, you see greenhouse gas emissions. On the x-axis, you see time, and you typically start in, say, 2022, going out until 2050 along the x-axis. And the greenhouse gas emissions for the current condition, where it says we are here, that represents the baseline. So in Simcoe, it's around 37,000 tons. We then draw out a scenario of what would happen if no action is taken, and that's the top line, what we call the business as usual. It declines because of buildings becoming more efficient, vehicles becoming more efficient. We then identify a bunch of actions that can be taken, and these could be building retrofits or increased purchase of electric vehicles or renewable energy, and each one of those actions is represented by a colored wedge. So purple might be one action, yellow another action, and so on. And when you combine all those actions, you reduce your emissions, and that becomes your pathway to decarbonization. The remaining emissions are the shaded gray area. And so under business as usual conditions, Simcoe would emit around 1.5 million tons of emissions out until 2050. So that's the opportunity to reduce emissions. So what we do then is we take what the projected capital costs are for all of the energy consuming assets in Simcoe, so buildings, vehicles, fleet, etc., and we identify where the major expenditures are likely to happen. So when does a roof need to be replaced, or building retrofit, or when is a new building planned? So we identify all those points, which is essentially the capital forecast or asset management plan. And we look at what opportunities there are to piggyback low carbon actions on top of those. So there's a new boiler that needs to be replaced. Let's put a heat pump in instead. And there may be an incremental capital cost, so an extra bit of money that's required to make that happen. Or a roof is being replaced. Let's put on extra insulation. Or a new car is being purchased. Let's get an electric vehicle. And so over time, those costs are projected to decline. In fact, most of those costs are going to be at parity, for example, EVs before 2030 with the fossil fuel powered alternative. So we're tracking all of those moving parts for Simcoe and all of its assets over time. The flip side of that story is that most low carbon actions or decarbonization actions are more efficient than their fossil fuel based equivalent. So heat pump is 3 to 4 times more efficient than a natural gas boiler, or an electric vehicle is up to 5 times more efficient than a gasoline car. And so efficiency means less energy consumed, which means less money expended. And so the blue line here is what you would have spent. This is an example. And the red line is what happens when you purchase those more efficient options. And those savings are what can finance that incremental capital cost that I mentioned. And when you combine those two together, you get this jagged bar chart like you see there. And what's really interesting is there's more capital costs initially, but at some point, those capital costs are offset by greater savings, and you start to achieve more and more savings. And so you can see that with the red line, which is the low carbon option, the blue line, which is the conventional, and there's a pivot point at which they switch over. And this is the incremental. If you subtract the business as usual cost from the low carbon cost, you can see there's a higher cost initially, and then it starts to go down below. And we see that pivot point on every project that we do is getting closer and closer to current conditions, meaning that the low carbon options are getting more and more cost effective. So this is tricky stuff because you're talking about new technologies, you're talking about culture change, all sorts of different dynamics that you have to think about as we're decarbonizing an organization. So some of the key ingredients to success, which we're seeing organizations implement: annual carbon budgets along the capital and operating budget. So what are the GHG emissions that are associated with all the expenditures? A financing system to get those higher initial capital costs, such as a revolving loan fund that can lend out the money to the project and then get the savings from that project later on. We're seeing people start to embed consideration of embodied emissions, so the emissions that are in materials like steel or concrete or wood in the analysis. And then clear and transparent reporting. And there's lots of different interactive dashboards that municipalities are using to show how they're doing on their journeys. So to give you some sense of elements that you'll likely see, well, actually insights from projects that we've seen. Typically now, it used to be decarbonization plans were about kind of sacrifice and spending money. Now they're starting to save money, and we're seeing that across the board. So it's now the cost benefit is very clear. Most of these projects involve organizational change, both the way the organization works, so job, for example, job responsibilities, but also technological change, and that can be tricky. People who are used to dealing with some equipment now have to deal with different types of equipment. And to make these projects happen, you need a whole of organization approach. And that means every staff member is involved in different ways according to their responsibilities. And typically it's very motivating, both for the staff, but also for the communities. So pieces that you can expect to see: GHG impacts of major projects and policies as a decision point for you to consider. Alignment between climate objectives and asset management and capital forecasts. That's really critical to making it happen. Otherwise, it becomes a very expensive project. If you don't get that alignment, you're going to be making major investments that don't necessarily have the same payback. Possibly changes to job descriptions and possibly new positions. major capital expenditures in the short term, because a lot of this stuff does involve incremental costs initially to get savings over the medium to long term. And then new methods for delivering infrastructure, because a deep emissions reduction building project, for example, is a different delivery process than a conventional building delivery if you want to get the cost savings. So to give you a quick case study, this is the city of Edmonton. I use this example because it's in the north, so everyone's like, how could you possibly decarbonize Edmonton? But it has been a major leader on climate action for probably 15 years. It has both a community-facing element and an organization-wide or corporate-facing element. It's called Branded Change for Climate, and it is a signature initiative for the city. This is for the corporate operations. This is their trajectory. So they're at about 400,000 tons, so approximately 10 times what Simcoe County's emissions are. And a lot of that is because they have very dirty electricity. And so you see that initial drop-off. That's the electricity getting cleaner. And then each of those wedges are the actions that they're implementing to decarbonize their operations. The big orange one is that they're buying 100% clean electricity for their operations and have been for several years now. And that takes a big chunk of their emissions off immediately. They published the first carbon budget of any municipality in Canada last year. So that showed how their planned expenditures were aligning with their GHG targets or not. On the community side, they were not aligned, and that caused a lot of debate amongst council and the community. But on the corporate side, they are very much on track. So the dotted line is their projected emissions, the green line is their carbon budget, and you can see their emissions are coming down. Green is that renewable energy procurement, so purple is their actual emissions, and they're right aligned with their carbon budget on the corporate side. And so how are they doing that? The green electricity procurement is critical. This is the convention center, if anyone's been there in Edmonton. The whole roof is coated in solar panels. It's called a building integrated photovoltaic. And the cool thing is that that is a poem written in Dewey Decimal System in the roof. So anyone who studied that tap, tap, tap can read that poem made of solar panels. They built the first zero emissions fire hall, which is a tricky building. A lot of people said that wouldn't be possible because the doors have to open so frequently, but they've managed to pull that off. Built this year. They've got a very large fleet of electric buses and electric bus charging stations, which were really leading in North America in a cold climate. It's really remarkable to see how they've pulled that off, 60 electric buses so far. And so that is a quick example of how Edmonton is on its way, and I'll pass it back to Don.
Thank you. So it really is all about how to reduce our carbon footprint. And just to cover at a high level some of the changes you will see as council, you'll start to see GHG reduction target considerations in many of the work that we bring to you. It'll be within the strategic plan, our long-term financial plan, our annual budget development process. Our project charter and business case formats that we use as staff will be updated to include GHG considerations where applicable. We will also be, as we are currently, networking with your staff at your municipalities to support them in these types of changes and any plans that they're initiating on their own. And we get real good value back and forth with those conversations with your staff. And internally, our work plan priorities, we will have a GHG reduction, mitigation, and adaptation goal on our work plans quite often in the work that we do, depending on our staff position. In terms of construction, we're already looking at the GHG reduced construction format in many of the projects that I'm working on now. We are looking at a fleet policy revision to support the transition to lower GHG emitting vehicles. Solid waste is reviewing opportunities on reducing their emissions, and of course, transportation maintenance and construction will be reviewing their construction activities as well. One of the great things about the change we are in, the time we are in, is there's a lot of funding being offered. And so we have Angela, who's over there, Angela Leach, our Supervisor of Sustainable Operations, searching for funding opportunities, and they are all over the place. So we're seeking those out, and she shares them with your municipalities as well. Other potential changes are purchasing verifiable carbon offsets, the green energy that you all spoke about, our forest consideration, and our procurement policy will also be looked at. And our transportation master plan, which is always under development and improving, we'll be looking more at EVs and promoting e-cycling, encouraging GV parking spaces, etc. So in summary, the county, along with all government entities, we need to rethink how we heat, cool, and construct facilities, how we operate our fleet, our vehicles, our transit, and how we reduce and manage waste, all to reduce GHG emissions. So again, we'll be back in the fall with our proposed reduction target and our plan to meet the goal in the fall. And in the meantime, we'll continue with our ongoing efforts, and we'll be bringing you that information every chance we get. So thank you. Any questions at this time?
Any questions from council? Councillor Meadows.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regards to all this great technology that we see coming forward, my biggest concerns are the solar panels, the wind generators, the new electric cars, and their recyclability. None of them right now have any recyclability and are ending up in landfills or in toxic waste sites. It's fine going ahead with this green energy, but we're also destroying our planet while doing it. So I know we have to go with climate change and everything else like that, but these are some of the initiatives I'd like to see the provincial government or federal government get involved with to try and get things rolling as far as recyclability. It's a big concern because when you look at the carbon footprint in producing all these things, it's higher than what it is for gas or oil. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Dolan.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. The GHG reduction work is great, but I'm wondering how that fits in with capital planning and asset management going forward, because while we do all this work, we are still needing to build back better in our stormwater management. We have to build more redundancy into things. Is that anticipated in those cost reductions, that building more, that the asset management or the capital that we have to invest in the future will require more redundancy?
Yeah, the great part of GHG mitigation opportunities is many of them increase resilience as well. So a highly insulated building can maintain comfortable temperatures for much longer. We call that passive survivability when the power's out. Or if you have local generation with renewables and combine that with batteries, then you can also maintain the functioning of that infrastructure when there is some sort of disruption. So a lot of those pieces can really be synced up with careful planning. This project itself isn't specifically about adapting to climate impacts, but there are a lot of synergies and more as we sort of figure out how to put all these pieces together.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, yes, Councillor Cox and Councillor Hamlin.
Through the chair to Dawn. This is once again very clear on how, like my municipality, we don't have a corporate action person assigned. We do have a plan. But is this something that maybe the county could work with the municipalities? Because you will find out more about the grants that are coming out or things that are happening to let our staff know. And I don't know if you have a contact person for each one, but this is another way you could help us. Thank you.
Absolutely, and through the chair, yes, Angela Leach in our Sustainable Operations Department, she is currently having a monthly call with staff at member municipalities who are participating. So just Angela Leach is the contact through myself if you wish, and I can connect you to make sure you've got potentially someone on the call if you designate someone. And she does bring a newsletter through email as well as the regular teleconference each month to talk about opportunities on that front. One thing I will note, just in answer to the original comment, we do have the EV show out front today, and there are a lot of people out there who can speak to the the situation currently with EVs in terms of the impact on the environment and the cradle to grave impact in terms of the environment, which is rapidly changing as technology evolves in terms of recycling, especially EV batteries is one. And I know there are a lot of, obviously, people working on this problem, to your point. So it is a changing field, and it's, I think, improving.
And supplemental, sorry, through the chair. We do have our climate action plan with SSEA. So they have hired a climate person. So if you could maybe reach out to them also, absolutely, and we can all work together on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Warden. Thank you for the presentation. I love the concept. I don't know why I hadn't thought about it before, but I hadn't, of being able to, see the investments you make as helping fund the capital investments, helping, be funded by the savings in energy. So that was really useful. I'm going to take that back to our staff for discussion. One question I have is, will we have enough electricity in the grid to do all these things for all these municipalities? And I keep reading that there isn't, and I asked one of the senior execs from EPCOR who came from Edmonton to meet me in the fall, new mayor, everyone wants to meet me, for 2 months. And he was like shaking his head like not his job, doesn't think, I took it from him, I may have misinterpreted, but that there isn't enough room in the system. And so my question is, as a county with 16 municipalities, is there any weight we can bring to bear on senior levels of government to start thinking about this? We know as we're growing to build homes, there's not enough infrastructure. And now we're putting, more and more emphasis on electricity. And again, the infrastructure isn't there. And I just, would like us to be weighing in on the big picture as we go along as well. Do you see that as possible?
Through the chair, I'll start, and perhaps our CAO may wish to comment. In terms of the requirements for increased electricity, I've been listening to, and there was actually a story on the CBC this morning on the radio with regard to nuclear power. And I know that nuclear power has a bit of a bad rap, but nuclear power is an extremely clean, low GHG source of power, and it's very, very large in terms of what you get for a small amount. The interesting quote the gentleman made was that all of the nuclear fuel that exists currently will fit inside of a hockey arena and be the height of a telephone pole. That's all of it. And that's a very interesting fact because I think, at least in my own mind, I think about nuclear waste as a very large amount of waste. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there that maybe, and thoughts are shifting toward that in terms of your point, which is we're going to need a lot more clean electricity. In terms of what we can do to communicate with the province, Mark, maybe I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, there's been a couple of good points raised. I do think that hydro and hydro capacity is something that is being considered. And you're right, they need to come up with better ways and cleaner ways. I think Councillor Measure's point about some of the initiatives that were done a few years ago have left some questions with respect to the recyclability of some of the outlinings. But certainly when we do formulate our action plan, that's something that we intend on relaying to the province of Ontario, and certainly through opportunities like AMO, and I know AMO as well is pushing for some of that. Those are, I think, the venues to try and get that message. I don't think, they're certainly aware that they need to generate more electricity in a cleaner, more effective way, and I think Director Hipwell's correct. I think, nuclear and things like that sometimes have a connotation if you look at it in terms of value and the cleanliness of the generation of that electricity. I think you'll start to see some of those come back around.
I'll go to Councillor Dolan, and then I've got Councillor Lavoie.
Thank you. If I could just add to that. So the IESO is active in this file right now, and they've come to AMO and done presentations, and they're actively engaging municipalities. So if you see an IESO email come through in your email, that is the group that is that is engaged and responsible for increasing electricity supply in Ontario.
Okay. Councillor Lavoie.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Just a quick question. Do you plan on reporting against any of the global greenhouse standards, such as ISO, or something that we can measure ourselves against other municipalities or jurisdictions or sectors? Thank you very much.
Through the chair, thank you for that question. That's a great question. There are accounting standards that are being used by all municipalities, as you mentioned, and the county's methodology will use the GHG protocol, which is the standard for corporate operations. The ISO standard is also useful for project level quantification, so a particular investment or something that's made, and that would be reflected in, for example, carbon budgeting methodology. And those are becoming increasingly standard in the same way financial accounting standards dominate in the financial sphere for exactly the reasons you say, accountability and comparability.
Okay, Councillor Meadows.
Yeah, I just get concerned when I hear that nuclear energy is clean energy. It is not a clean energy. It may not produce carbons and other toxins other than radiation, which kills everybody. Our stockpiles of radioactive material are very high, and they're also looking at storing them near our water supplies. And to me, that is a huge concern environmentally for almost every municipality because, you know, we need our water to survive as a species. The radioactive problems with nuclear power, and it seems to be promoted everywhere that it is clean energy, and I'd like that misconception to be changed in our wording. Thank you.
Comment? Go ahead, Dawn.
I'd like to comment, and I don't disagree with anything you've said. When I say the word clean, I'm really associating with greenhouse gas emitting versus fossil fuel, which is obviously burning and creating that pollution that we're all trying to avoid. And I do not disagree with anything you're saying about storing the waste near water supplies. That makes no sense, and I think there's a lot of folks out there working against that as well.
Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Warden. I was going to add to Councillor Dolan's comments about the IESO. In addition, the COLI panel, or the Ontario Finalizes Electrification and Energy Transition Panel, if you want to call it that, they're working towards solutions. And I think it's incumbent of all municipalities, and this echoes Councillor Dolan's comments, to really participate in this process. It's important to municipalities to understand their electrification needs over the next 20 to 50 years. And they're talking about a $400 billion investment into electricity over that period of time. And municipalities need to make sure that they're in constant communication with their service provider, and the service provider is aware of the needs they're going to have, because you don't want to get caught in a situation where it can't be provided. So I just wanted to add those comments as well.
Any other questions? Or go ahead.
Through the chair, sorry, just to add to your comment, the study you're referring to is the ISO Pathways to Decarbonization study that identified the $400 billion investment. And there is a webinar which I'm actually giving on Wednesday through the Clean Air Partnership, doing a bit of a critique on that study from the perspective of municipalities, which may be of interest to help sort of show all of the dynamics of the electricity system in Ontario and what it means for growth and so on.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? I'm not seeing any, so
that item CCW 2023-140 dated May 23rd, 2023 regarding Simcoe County Archives operations in April 2023 be received. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Item 6.1, Museum Annual Activities Review. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Evans, seconded by Councillor Van Staveren. that item CCW 2023-149 dated May 23rd regarding the museum annual activities review for 2022 be received. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. Now I'll go on to Human Services. Chairman Leduc.
Thank you, Warden. We're at Section 7, Human Service Consent Agenda. I have one item. It's a CCW 2023-116. And I have a Community Safety and Wellbeing Plans, Implementation Plan. So I'll turn it over to our General Manager, Jane Sinclair, to introduce presenters. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good morning again. I'm very pleased to introduce Colleen Simpson, who is our Manager of Emergency Management. And we have Carrie Warner and Catherine Manners, who have been working with the county on assisting the municipalities across the county with the development of their community safety and well-being plans. There's a detailed report, item 7.1 CCW 2023-116. So with that, I'll turn it over to Colleen. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Jane. Thank you. I'm going to start with a few words and the slides. The slide deck is available in the agenda with the report. We're not going to go on every slide. We wanted to provide all of this information to you, but we'll speak to some of the highlights. So I'm going to talk about some of the context for the historical purpose that we're here, and then Carrie and Catherine will talk about some of the work they're doing and how to implement these plans. So the understanding why we're doing this came out of the Bill 175 Safer Ontario Act in 2018. So in 2019, this work started with our office, and we worked with our partners across the county and started developing these plans. There was a slight pause due to COVID, but we kept going with Carrie to create these plans, and they were all adopted by your municipal councils in 2021. So by July 1st, mostly in May and June. And so now we're in the implementation phase 2. So that's where the work is really getting underway. And I'm going to go through a couple more slides. This is the framework. We concentrate on the social development and prevention rings, the outer rings, to get upstream of those issues that are causing concerns in the communities. So try and get upstream of those. And here's our timeline. So we did meet and came into this work in the fall of 2019. Really pushed through it despite the pandemic. We worked through that. And again, as I said, they were adopted in 2021. Some of the work began in 21 with getting some of those community organizations organized and get those committees going. And then the implementation work began in 22. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to speak about some of the work so far. Thanks.
Good morning. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of slides that will just speak to year one. So Carrie and I are both from Simcoe County, and so we've been working closely with implementing these plans. Just direct you to the black boxes. That's the easiest way to kind of follow this slide. So in year one, we assembled local tables, and we'll talk a little bit more about those local tables, but you'll get a sense of that they're tri-sector. We have many very engaged people that are involved with the local tables. We spent the first year looking at the community safety and well-being plans and mapping out a continuum of work around those 8 areas of risk. Each plan has 3 or 4 risks that they pay attention to. We made sure that your municipal sites are linked to the County of Simcoe sites around information around community safety and well-being. They're very robust plans, at least around 100 pages each, so we wanted to make sure people had access to those plans. In year one, we chose initial populations. So because we want to support all citizens around community safety and well-being, we wanted to start with different populations in each of the 5 plans. And so we've chosen vulnerable seniors and youth and working class people, all different depending on which area of the plan. And then from there, we have started with some initial strategies. So again, you can see on the screen that each of the plan has kind of different things that they're working on as we move forward.
Good morning, everyone. This is just to reinforce that the work we're doing aligns with the broader work that's being done at various planning tables throughout the county, so that we're not running rogue or doing our own thing, and we're trying to optimize and leverage the work that's already going on, and where possible, amplify it at the local level. So this slide is a bit of a busy slide. There's lots of numbers, but I think really what it's trying to express is the work that we did in 2022. So Catherine will talk about in a few slides what that evaluation measurement looks like. But really, I kind of want to direct your attention to the far right under community value. So the community value is really the development of the local leadership at these local tables in your communities. Engaging people with lived experience, that's very important for us. Now that we have some of those kind of foundational pieces underway, that's something that we're actively pursuing. We developed a guide on how to engage people with lived experience in your communities. And also network expansion. So we know that people were connected long before we came on the scene and they had relationships, but we're really trying to figure out ways to broaden that, to diversify that, and to also connect into that private sector, which often doesn't happen when you're looking at community or social services at the local level. Partnership collaboration, and really developing the skills of those local leaders at the local tables. And again, because this is in your local communities, really focusing on place-based initiatives. What happens with the work that we're doing should only exist, or we're looking at it through the lens of your communities. So not necessarily what would happen in Edmonton, maybe it could, but what could and should happen in your local communities. And then updated data and mapping. And then, like I mentioned before on the previous slide, mobilizing regional strategies at the local level.
So this work is hard to evaluate, because it's a very long, upstream, long work. We have created a bit of an evaluation framework that's unique to Simcoe County. So what we've done is around the outside of that blue boxes, you're seeing the different governance structures that we make sure that we connect with to make sure we're getting the impact that we need. And then we've identified kind of 4 areas based on some work that's being done around collective impact and the Tamarack work around impact frameworks. And so a lot of the early days work was process, getting these local tables up to stream, up to working order, and then looking at different products and programs that they're suggesting. So that's those initial populations, and then what they're doing to start to deliver, as Carrie said, in the local communities around community safety and well-being. We also are looking for any times where there could be policy work that could be done. For example, Carrie mentioned that we like to engage people with lived experience, so often those individuals should be compensated, so sometimes that's a policy change that needed to happen. And then we're looking at the populations, so those initial populations, and how can we have long-term impact for the residents and the people who work in Simcoe County. So that's the framework that we're going to be following over the next year.
So given that before this work started, there was no community safety and well-being plan or information to go off of, we started developing the plans by looking at a very large, extensive data set. And we spent a lot of considerable time early on in 2019 looking at about 237 indicators of community safety and well-being that was taken from a document that was produced by the Ontario College of Police Chiefs. And we worked with our community partners, including various members of the county, the health unit, the police services that were involved in the municipal plans that we were developing. And we looked at also 211 and paramedicine data was also used. And we looked at what we could, using criteria, what we should be measuring. And so we followed a very, very robust, and if you've ever been through it with public health, it's quite incredible, this matrix, this prioritization matrix that they use. Great learning for all of us to kind of distill that down into a smaller group of indicators, and then from there they were weighted, and we landed on 24 indicators. Those were the original 24, and so you can see them, small font, maybe you can see it better on your screens, but we used those and we collected that data for each sub-geography of the county, so each of the 5 plans, and then we compared that data to where they compared against the county of, or Simcoe County, and then where they compared against provincially, and that's how we determined those areas of risk. So we're now at the point where we're going to go back and we're going to refresh that data, and given that there's been a whole pandemic in between, the first data collection and now, we're also asking the question, is this are these the right indicators that we should be looking at going forward, and is there anything new?
So we're really just talking you today to remind you that these are 4-year plans. We're in year 2 of the plan, so we're starting to implement at the local level. We've talked to you about the evaluation framework, and then just to start to bring forward some of the governance pieces that we weren't ready to implement in year 1 that we're starting to move forward in year 2. So we're just, I guess, through the chair here to answer any questions you have.
Thank you for that presentation. Any questions? Councillor Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, I guess, go back a bit. We talked earlier about the efficiencies of the upper tier Simcoe County, and this is just another example. So back when Minister Marie-France Lalonde was the Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services, she mandated that every municipality in Ontario must have a community safety and well-being plan. And it was very much a stick and not a carrot. If you didn't have one by X and X a date, they would do one for you and send you the bill. So, you know, Innisfil had started fairly early because we had a police chief who was very interested in the process and really felt, to quote former Mayor Lehman, instead of fishing people out of the creek downstream, why don't we go upstream and find out why they're jumping in the first place? And that's what this whole thing is about, but it became apparent to us very quickly how much work it was going to be. And when the county uploaded that actual work for all of the member municipalities, it was really, really helpful for us. And also it was divide and conquer. So instead of every municipality having to deal with all of the determinants of health, each municipality got to kind of choose the ones that they were most passionate about and divide up that work that would all be uploaded into the final plan. So I just want to point that out. Is like we think about paramedics, we think about long-term care, but there's other advantages, and this is just a great example. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. All right, I'll go with Councillor Meadows, then Councillor Van Stavern, and Councillor Follis.
Thank you. With regards to your information that you're obtaining, I see you got the paramedic services, OPP, and everything else like that. There was no mention of fire department at all. Is there any reason for that?
I can speak to this, and if Carrie wants to add more, thank you, and through the chair. We did look at that, but any calls or risks that we were looking at that the fire was associated to this, paramedics would have been at that call or have information about that call. So rather than looking in multiple sources, we sort of streamlined it a little bit, but we did consider that, and we worked with some of the fire chiefs, both as a fire chief and also as that municipal representation, and we came to that conclusion that we'll get the information we need through that work and through that stream.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Van Stavern.
Thank you very much. We had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to meet with the Georgian Health team. I was very concerned when I came out of the meeting, and you've sort of addressed it a bit here today, whose job is what. And I think going forward, I hope you really identify it, because there was a lot of passing the buck. When you identify, let's use an example of a first responder with the police, and you've got a mental health issue. How do we get those people the right help they need? How do we get the people? We look at our school system today. I mean, we're not talking, we haven't really pushed our schools, but the school boards have taken away the healthcare workers who would normally be properly trained and say, no, we don't need them in the school. I really encourage you to get that under control and define whose role and responsibility is, because everybody seems to be passing the buck right now, and somebody who looks at the mental health side of our community, I think it's really important that we start handling people or helping people in a different way. So good luck, and thank you for your work.
Thank you for those comments and your question, and through the chair. So through those 8 areas of risk, I'm going to go back a slide or two, or this one. So mental health and addictions is actually one that's across the board for all 5 areas. We did 5 plans for a few geographies, and everyone had this one. So that is one of the first ones we're looking at. But we're also looking, these 8 areas of risk, we're looking at ways that they intersect. So school or education, as you can see, is one of them. So we are looking at ways that we can minimize duplication of work and see how they intersect. But did you want to add anything to that, either of you, on that piece? Yeah, sure. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you, and through the chair, in response, I agree with what you're saying, that it is a little mucky, and I think it's mucky for providers out there as well, based on how they're funded and their mandates, and we're certainly seeing this in our work in leading this community safety and well-being. But I think we have to remember, why this came into effect, and it's really that police were often responding to calls that were not criminal in nature, and so this is trying to get upstream from that, and that's why in our communities we're really focusing on the bullseye, the blue and the green, the prevention, the social development. We feel like there's lots of great work happening in the red and the yellow, which is that kind of immediate crisis response. And people kind of know their roles in the red and the yellow. They seem to know their roles very clearly, and it's clearly defined, but then it gets a little murky as you get outside of that. And so with these local tables they're formed in each of the kind of sub-geographies or GMGs as we call them, there's that kind of cross-pollination and conversation. And so that's what's really exciting for Kathy and I in this work, is knowing that you can't talk about income without talking about housing. You can't talk about housing without talking about employment. And so we're trying to really break down some of those conversations to find out what's at the root of a lot of this, and then kind of work our strategies towards that. So.
Okay, I've got Councillor Follis, and I've got Councillor McDonald next.
Thanks. Through the chair, I just wanted to say great presentation. I really appreciated the detail. The question I had, looking, I believe it's page 43 of our agendas, but breaking down the 2022 impact summary, there's the grid there that has the different components of ideas and actions to be taken. And I noticed housing had the highest number, 95. And I'm curious, can you speak to is housing kind of that one area that needs the most attention, needs the most focus? I've often heard housing first models, and I'm curious if that's something that is for consideration. Obviously complicated issues, but I'm curious if that is kind of one of the major focuses. Thanks. Or in what way it's a major focus. Thanks.
Thank you. Through the chair in response, not necessarily. So I think we would all agree that housing is, critical and in a bit of a crunch for many. But when we're looking at where those green numbers came from, they actually came from it was a 4-month process where we broke down each area of risk with these local tables, and we looked at in the blue and the green, in prevention and in social development, what are some ideas? Generating ideas of what we could do. And in the housing portion of the plans, certainly the housing portion speaks to, affordable housing, but some of that is kind of outside of the capability of Kathy and I. We know the good work is happening in that in that area. We see evidence of that in our communities. So when we're talking about housing, we were really talking about sustainable, keeping people successfully housed, not necessarily looking at homelessness. That's really kind of in that more emergent response. And so we're focusing upstream. So those numbers come from ideas that were generated looking at what would our communities need from a prevention piece and from a social development piece around housing so that people had access to housing, could afford keep their housing, could afford their housing. Kathy, is there anything you wanted to add to that? And in some communities, we've actually started looking at multi-generational housing. We know that's a kind of a growing need and topic in some communities. And so we talked about what would our role in that be? Like, what would the local table's role in that be? So it might not be on deciding, zoning or anything like that, but maybe it's messaging. Maybe it's around, kind of NIMBYism around, not in my backyard do I want to have multi-generational housing. So those are some of the ideas. So the short answer is it doesn't mean housing just because it has more numbers is more important. It's just that maybe there was more thoughts driven around that based on the conversation.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Chair Leduc. This is just a comment from 2 councillors ago, just about making sure it's not muddy, whose job is to do what. And I was just going to make a comment on, because he mentioned OPP, and I know that in our tri-party with the Nottawasaga Police, they now have trained mental health care personnel that go on the calls with the OPP, and that has been a huge change for the communities. So I just want to comment. Thank you.
That's a good example.
All right, thank you. Further questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this good work. Unless we have a snapshot to see where we are in our community, we don't know what the problems are. The comment I wanted to make was, when we get down to what do we do next, what do we do about all this? I'm just hoping that we'll see an approach that recognizes we have scarce resources in people and in money, and that if there's one good thing to do, for example, that we put all our focus on that, just to see if we can get the biggest impact for our scarce resources. What I hear is, we're at a crisis point in terms of mental health in the province, in our country. I hear that we're at a crisis point for housing, whether it's homeless or just people who are housed in housing that just isn't suitable. It's not to standard. It's too small. It's, there's a million reasons. So I'm sort of tending to the, running through my head, is housing, as we just heard, is housing first the answer? And I leave it to you professionals, but I just hope we don't spread ourselves too thin thinking part of this is social media, part of it's, police force, part of it's this, when maybe the real answer is in front of us. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, and I don't even need to see her to know that she's got this burning energy behind me, because there's something that you pointed out that she's very passionate about and is going to, it's creeping into our work. And so I think that she's probably pretty excited to share that. So.
Wow, that's a setup, isn't it? So a couple comments. So we look at this work from what can residents do, what can organizations do, what can the system do, right? So because everybody's got to be working on this at different levels. And so, and I think Carrie's alluding to the fact I'm really interested in moving this work at the resident level, and there's been good work already done around that. Also, we're very attentive to the fact that especially the social sector and emergency service sector is overburdened right now. And so we are, because we're looking at different risk areas in the different 5 plans at different times, that we're hoping that an efficiency that we find in one plan can then be shared with another plan, so that we're starting to move things more quickly by working on different things in different areas. So those 2 things, again, the different levels, individuals, organizations, and system, and then working on different risks at the same time. We think that we're going to be able to move things faster with not putting any more burden on the good people who are trying to do all the work that, because all of these crisis areas, all these risk areas, we see across the province, across the country, right? So everybody's working on them in different ways, and Carrie and our mandate is to look at prevention and social development, again, to try to get upstream of this thing so that somebody keeps their house versus loses. It's harder to put somebody back in a house after they've lost versus trying to keep them in. So that same with employment. It's better to keep somebody employed than to try to find employment. So that's the work that we're trying to do.
So I think it also ties into what we're looking to measure. So while we're trying to capture, measurement in different ways, and you might remember the slide that had the box, but we're also, as I mentioned before in one of my slides, we're looking at refreshing those metrics or that data, and we're actually looking to figure out is there kind of like a North Star metric for each of these areas of risk that we can then work with the community partners, and that might be a little different for them, working collaboratively on one North Star metric, but that's our ambition, and so that's kind of the work ahead for the next 3 months, especially when people are kind of a little quieter in the summer, is kind of working that in the background. So we hope to be able to share some good news about that in our next presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Further comments or questions? Seeing none. So thank you, ladies, very much for the presentation. It is a very difficult one, but we appreciate the community safety and well-being. So look forward to the next presentation in the future. So I need a mover and a second for this, please. Moved by Deputy Warden Coughlin, seconded by Councillor Sandu, that the following consent item have been given due consideration be received. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We are on to Section 8, Human Services, Community Services. I have 8.1 CCW 2023-153 Homeless Prevention Program, Investment Plan, and Summer-Winter Responses. I need a mover and a second to put this on the floor. Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Fowler. Question, concerns with this report? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. We're into Section 9. Oh, hang on. I better read it, right? I voted, sorry. I'm going to read that item CCW 2023-153 dated May 23rd, 2023 regarding the Homeless Prevention Program, Investment Plan, and Summer-Winter Response be received, and that the proposed HPP investment plan be approved for submission to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and that staff be approved to proceed with recommendations as outlined in item CCW 2023-153, including the HPP investment plan and the Summer-Winter responses to support the homeless prevention system. Again, all in favor, please. Thank you. We're into number 9, Human Services Land Ambulance. I have 9.1, CCW 2023-155, Patient Models of Care, Alternative Destination, Hospice Proposal Acceptance. Questions or concerns with this? Report. Question? Councillor Cox?
No, I just need to make a comment. I think this is the best I've heard for a long time. Too many times palliative people are taken to the hospital, as it says, and that's not where they should be. They should be going to where they can be looked after. So I think this is a wonderful step ahead that we've done, and that they will get the proper care. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. This is an excellent report, an excellent way to do the different transitions of healthcare. So, okay, I'm moving a second for this, please. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Greenlaw. All in favor? Oh, hang on, I better read it first. Let me read it. Sorry. That I have CCW 2023-155 dated May 23rd, 23 regarding the Ministry of Health, Patient Models of Care, Alternative Destination Hospice Proposal Acceptance and Update be received. That's it. All in favor? Thank you. I am now into Section 10, Human Services Long-Term Care Committee of Management. I have CCW 10.1, CCW 2023-156, Seniors Month. That's a good month. So question concerns with this report? It's actually a great report. There's lots of things to do. These seniors are very active at the 4 homes, so it looks like a lot of fun. Seeing no questions, moved by Councillor Fryer, Councillor Corbell, seconded. Let me read it now. Here it is. That item CCW 2023-156 dated May 23rd, 2023 regarding Seniors Month be received. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Into 10.2, It Takes a Village, Living and Working in Long-Term Care and Senior Services Video Series. May I get a mover and a second to put this on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor Evans, seconded by Councillor McDonald. Question concerns with this one? I've seen some videos. They're great videos. The volunteers that are there, the whole system is just fantastic to see. So, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Chair Leduc. I just wanted to make a comment on it. This was so well done. We got to see it in Jane's St. Clair General Manager, her presentation up in Aurelia, but leaves many without having a tear in their eye, and it's beautifully done. Well done.
Yes, you're right. I had to have Kleenex when I was doing some of the videos, so it worked very well. It was because I was sneezing. All right. I have my mover seconder, correct? So that item, CCW 2023-157, dated May 23rd, 2023, regarding It Takes a Village, Living and Working in Long-Term Care and Senior Services video series be received. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Other matters of consideration? All right, seeing none, I turn it back to you, Warden.
Thank you, Chair Leduc, and now I'll turn it over to Chair Dolan for Corporate Services.
Thank you so much. Starting on item 12, Corporate Services Consent. There are 4 items on the consent agenda. And if I'm not mistaken, before I go to one or another, I'm going to go to Jim Elliott. I believe we're going to have a presentation on the Forest Annual Report for 2022.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Dolan. I'm going to invite our County Forester, Graham Davies, down to speak and highlight some of the really important attributes that we've identified through the annual report for the County Forest, as well as the Forest Conservation Bylaw update from 2022 as well. The forest system is an incredible asset for the County of Simcoe. And sometimes I feel that it's maybe not fully appreciated in terms of the contribution it makes. So didn't want to spend a lot of time with a formal presentation, but I would ask that if Graham could highlight some of the findings of the annual report, that would be really helpful for the members of this House.
Thank you, and good morning. And through the chair, I'll just take a couple of minutes here. I know there's clearly it's a pretty busy agenda today, but maybe I can just point out a couple of items here as noted. So the first information report there is our Simcoe County Forest Annual Report, and this is very, very long history of providing these annual reports. And as noted in the summary itself, it's really for a couple of different reasons, but it's because we try to be as open and accessible and transparent as we can for the public and for council. It's an opportunity for us as staff to take stock of what we're doing, what we've achieved, and we funnel that all up to seeing how we're doing on our longer-term management objectives. And it's an important piece that we utilize for our forest certification for information. It also winds up part of the historic record. There's actually annual reports that go back many decades. To the time when the province was managing our forests under agreement prior to 1996. So there's a lot of information in here. I apologize. We try not, while we have to report on what we're doing, we try to make it as brief and concise as we can. But just to point out a couple of things really quickly, there's information here in Section 2 on our timber sales summary. Just mentioning this because there was some work that was done and I'll touch base on a subsequent report that's there on our management plan update. Just important to highlight that we continue to ensure that we use best available information and science in what we are doing to manage our forests and how we're projecting our growth and that type of thing. We have worked with the province over many decades actually in gathering information on how the forest grows through permanent sample plots. We did measure some of that data, and then we also did some additional work to look further into the future at how our trees are growing and how the timber supply will be coming from the forest, and that's related to some of the changes that we're seeing because of our aging red pine plantations and other plantations that were established early on in the 20s, 30s, and 40s when the county forest was established. So just some notes in there that information is in there, and we continue to work on updating that information. Numbers in there on our reforestation, and just a note on that, when you look at it on a year-over-year basis, it fluctuates quite a bit. We did plant a little bit over 40,000 trees in the spring of 2022, and that's usually related to previous acquisitions. The largest single plant there was due to an acquisition that we made 2 years prior to that. We certainly do some underplanting on other properties that we've held longer term as well, but usually the larger plants are when we're able to acquire new lands to add to the forest land base. And finally, just one other note on this report. There's Section 3 talks about the work that we do on managing and mitigating impacts from invasive species. We continue to work quite hard on that. It's an ongoing process, particularly with invasive plants and monitoring and managing, and then through adaptive management, continuing to evolve in how we're directing our resources in that regard. And also just to note that we are continuing to keep our eyes open for some longer-term problems that unfortunately are probably coming our way. We all know about the impacts with things like emerald ash borer, for example. That's well entrenched throughout the county now. We did a strategy on that actually 10 years ago when it was first arriving. We've now got our eyes on a couple of things called oak wilt, which are likely to impact our oak species in the future, and another insect that's unfortunately on the way and is now in Ontario that's impacting hemlock. So we continue to have to keep an eye on things and manage and mitigate the best that we can. So that was the County Forest Annual Report. Just very quickly, the next report is our Forest Conservation Bylaw Annual Report. And first, just highlighting that contrary to the County Forest Annual Report that has been done for many, many decades, this is only the second such report on our Forest Conservation Bylaw. I will admit that I wish we had started this many years before, because I think it's an important snapshot into what's going on out there in a couple of different areas. And the Forest Conservation Bylaw at the county level, for those that aren't aware, it's really about regulating commercial harvesting on private lands to ensure that it's sustainable. And it's also about doing the best that we can with regard to managing unfettered clearing of our woodlands. So on the commercial harvest front, there's some interesting things there. And by the way, it's an annual report, but I think it's important that we look at 5 years of data in these reports. It helps us to get a clear picture of what's going on in longer term. With commercial harvesting, there's a couple of things that stick out there for me, and perhaps for any of you that have taken a look at it. Total permits are trending down, which is a little bit surprising. But again, if you look back historically on this, you'll see waves of activity around Simcoe County, and it's actually most related to the value of sugar maple, because a lot of our private woodlands and our tolerant hardwood will be related to that. When prices get really, really high, more landowners while there's more buyers and there are more landowners that are selling timber through those time periods. The positive trend, however, and it's noted in here, is that we have a couple of different types of permits, and what we are seeing is a trend where the percentage of good forestry practices permits are trending up, and what that means is the landowner is hiring a professional forester or a consultant to assess the woodland and assure that it's managed properly. Harvesting permits are also available for landowners, but it's really about ensuring a minimum density of forest remains. It's not about best practice. So as you would understand, with a bylaw, all we can do is really we encourage best practice, but all we can regulate is a lower threshold of management. In any case, what it does indicate is, with the level of activity in Simcoe County, that we really do have quite a healthy wood-using industry. It's a good thing for the landowners that are able to sell their timber as long as they're doing it sustainably, and that's the intention here. But it's an important economic driver as well, surprisingly so in Simcoe County, not just on our county lands, but on private lands as well. Further, just a quick note, there's also discussion here about the exemptions to remove woodlands and a little bit of a snapshot on what's going on there. And I think this was a lot of the impetus in putting these reports together, because it provides a little more fulsome picture for council. Because if we don't do this, all council sees are the ones that come forward that staff are able to feel comfortable recommending when a woodland removal application comes forward. Typically, if staff aren't supportive, those are typically withdrawn by the landowners in most cases. So this provides a little bit more fulsome picture of that. And finally, and again, I'll be very brief here. The further information report is just to advise council that we are proceeding with the 10-year update to our 20-year forest management plan. Probably what's most pertinent at this point is just to advise there is information on the website now. It's up and going. So what we do have is a draft update to the plan that's available for public review and comment. There's a recorded presentation on there. It's about 20-25 minutes that goes through some of the proposed changes that are in the plan. And we are proceeding with some open houses. We had our first last week, and further to the earlier discussion from Your Worship about all the activities going on today, we actually have an open house occurring in the building today, this afternoon at 2 to 4, and again to 6 to 8, in case any of council have any room left for further activities at that time. We'll be in the conference center here, which is the old cafeteria, between 2 and 4 and 6 to 8, and then we have one more session out in Ormondonti on Thursday similarly. But again, all the information is online, including a recorded presentation, which I think provides a really good snapshot of what we're up to with our planning process. And I think I best leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Davis, and congratulations on turning 100 last year. I think it's also very appropriate that today, while we're talking about the climate action planning, that we also recognize the significant, valuable contribution of the Simcoe County Forest in that whole plan. So I would now go to the 4 items that are in the consent list. Questions, we'll do questions for Mr. Davis first, and then we'll go to motions if anyone wants to pull any of the 4 consent items. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. The Simcoe County Forest, this is just one example of why it's absolutely absurd to think that Simcoe County will be dismantled by the province, because, I mean, who's going to manage our forests? Well, I know one answer. We won't have them. We'll cut them all down and build sprawling estates on them. But, I mean, tongue-in-cheek and political jabs aside, the reality is the services like this that are so well managed by the county, that are so critical to our environment, our sustainability, and climate change, aren't something to be messed around with and to just be left and abandoned to local municipalities. We have no capacity in Midland to manage. We can barely manage the parks we have now, and there's an appetite for more parks in our community, if you can imagine, much to our operations team's chagrin, because it costs a lot of money to build and manage parks. But just calling out the efforts of the county, I truly believe that when the weighing and measuring happens, which again I welcome, that the quality and caliber of the services around important initiatives beyond, public safety initiatives like managing our forests will probably be the reason why we're left intact and largely unchanged, because things are just working well. So kudos and congrats, and this is just another reason why I have confidence that Simcoe County will prevail through this weighing and measuring exercise that's forthcoming.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Forester Davis. Thank you very much for the presentation. Great to hear. My question is actually more to do with the silviculture of forestry, and as a former forest firefighter myself in university, and how the events of Western Canada are playing out, and the role of fire in our forests as we move forward. It's actually both a beneficial and a destructive thing on both sides. But in evidence of what we see going on in Western Canada as these forests mature, and our ability to both manage our forests to reduce the risk of fire, but also to be prepared for if a fire does happen, and make sure that our local fire departments know how to deal with those type of issues, and how we look to make sure that those incidents at West do not happen here. Albeit, I realize that it's we don't have total control over it, but we can certainly minimize any risks. And I'm just curious if we're taking that into consideration. Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Thanks for the question, and through the chair. Yeah, great question. In particular, with what's going on out west, and maybe first off, one of the things we have going for us in this part of the world is really different forest type and variety than we have out west. There was a time, absolutely, when our Simcoe County forests were very, very fire prone, and if you go back to the 1950s in particular through the 70s. Tremendous amount of resources were put into fire management and mitigation and control. Fire guards were in place and maintained, all that type of thing. But that's when our conifer plantations were quite young, even-aged, and more fire-prone, right? As they age, as they diversify, and diversity and structural diversity and species diversity is something that we manage towards. As we do that, our forests actually become more fire resistant. Under extreme conditions on certain fire types, it's possible, but also because of the different nature of our forests here, they're much more broken up. Changing forest types fairly regularly means that sort of a catastrophic fire situation would be an extraordinarily unlikely event here. So we do have a number of things going for us that way. I would point out we did update, we do have a long-standing agreements with our local municipalities on fire control in the Simcoe County Forest. We actually purchased and provide to our local municipalities mobile fire caches that are out at a number of our local fire departments. And we do have communication on and making sure those are updated. The latest agreement actually provided a little bit of funding to ensure that our local fire departments get adequate training on wildland fires, which is different, as you would know, than structural. And I appreciated your note as well on the fact that fire is not just a destructive force, and for councillors that have been around for a little bit would know that we do incorporate controlled fire as well into our management regime. It's been used a couple of times to reduce fire risk on a couple of situations, but also to create the right conditions for forest regeneration and that type of thing as well. It's really an important part of our ecosystem in this part of the world that we do have fire, and obviously it has to be in a very, very controlled manner. So we do that as well.
Great, thank you very much. Sounds like it's totally under control. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Van Stavern.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have one question and one comment. First, to Mr. Davies, when I was reading the report about the different tracts that timber was sold off it, I almost got the impression that it's very much a money generator for this county. And we're looking at certain items today about whether it'd be costs of replanting or lands. Can you speak to that? Is that a regular occurrence that we make this much money off of our tracts, or is this strictly to catch up and clean up a few of our situations?
Mr. Davis?
Again, through the chair. So it is not. Our harvesting levels, and first of all, maybe from a revenue standpoint, I mean, our objective in the forest is not to make money. Our objective is to keep our forests healthy and productive and growing. We're very fortunate in Simcoe County that we have the types of forests that we have and the economy of scale that we have. And we've also had a very, very long history of practicing sound science-based management so that we are improving the value of our timber over time. So keeping our forests healthy, growing, increasing diversity over time, especially with our plantations, which require that type of management, does drive the revenue. Now, that said, we also work fairly hard to ensure that we receive maximum value for the timber that we do sell. All of that revenue is invested back into the forest itself. There is a county forest reserve fund, and so all of the revenues are directed back into the forest, and that's what pays for all the management, the property maintenance, the invasive species management, and that also contributes to the ability to continue to grow the forest estate as well through land acquisitions.
Okay, just one comment. Thank you for that. It was very interesting receiving with your forest management questionnaire that went out recently. I just want to let you know that I did forward it on as a representative here for the Simcoe Federation of Agriculture. They were provided with that questionnaire as well. It's very important to myself and people within the community that we maintain a healthy relationship with Simcoe County for the forestry, because as everybody's aware, farmers are major landowners and major forestry owners. So I'm hoping they're interacting with yourself in this planning procedure, and we thank you for your input on that.
Thank you. Next I had Councillor Compton.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the presenter. I had a question on, you had mentioned ecosystem management. The question is, we're in an area of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence lowlands, and it's vital to protect our forests. Has there been any studies in terms of cores and corridors for protection of species, because it's very vital for migration of different species to different areas? Is that taken into account in your report regarding ecosystem management?
Mr. Davis?
Through the chair, it's a great question. I think my short answer would be indirectly yes. Again, if you look at the distribution of our county forest today, and you look at what's been achieved over the last decade or two on additional land acquisition, it's largely been focused on our Greenlands system that's established through our official plan. So the link to broader scale planting, you're absolutely right. Those corridors are important. Larger blocks of forest are important to maintain and also to grow or to link from a wildlife habitat standpoint. So that's one of the most important criteria when we do look at opportunities to expand our forest. And again, our broader management within our forests is about diversity. So structural diversity, ages, species, those types of things. Providing those opportunities for different types of wildlife on a sort of a broader scale, and then right down to sort of a site-specific scale where, for example, we'd make sure that different types of stick nests and different habitat types are retained and protected when we are carrying out an operation or perhaps working with a trail group to plan a trail, avoiding more sensitive sites, those types of things. So it's looked at, in short, on a broad level on the way that we look at potential for land acquisition, and that link is made to our county planning, and that, the importance of the official plan in the Greenlands corridors is a big part of that.
Thank you, Councillor Compton. You might want to ask that again in our planning workshop this afternoon. And then I'll go to Councillor Bell.
Great. Through the chair, mine is more of a comment. We were fortunate enough to hear Mr. Davis come out to a volunteer appreciation at the Brecon Legion. And I would highly recommend, if you have an opportunity to see the presentation, possibly here in front of everyone. It's fascinating. It's really well done. His knowledge and the history of our forests is incredible. I've heard a lot of good things from people that attended that, and I would strongly recommend it. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Meadows.
Thank you. And thank you for our township allowing me to come here during this great topic. With regards to our forests, how many hectares do we have that are being reforested, and how many are being deforested right at the moment?
Mr. Davis.
So I'll start with the easy part, and again through you, Chair. How many are being deforested? I would say zero. Again, there's harvest levels aside. I mean, generally speaking, the type of forestry that we're practicing in this part of Ontario is selective management. Now, some of that can, and again, this is touched on in the report, but also in the 10-year update, that as we get to the stage where our plantations are aging. The unfortunate part about a plantation, of course, is that they're all the same age when they're planted. And red pine grows really well on our sandy soils and is a really great product, and it helps to transition the forest over to another forest type. But they can decline and start to, the overall health and whatnot can decline quite rapidly. So there are cases where those final removals of those old plantations can look fairly dramatic. But it typically, we do have a mixed forest understory. In some cases, we have to be a lot more proactive, and that's where we get into situations where we have conducted controlled burns, some replanting activity, some underplanting activity. So there's a range of ways that we would be reinvigorating these forests. But I would point out that it's still a forest typically, so it's simply at a different stage. And part of this is understanding that all of our different forest types are important, not just those mature climax forests. And a really good example of that is the work that we've done to restore Kirtland's warbler habitat on 2 sites here at our museum and our Packard tract, where young conifer plantation with openings was what that species needed to nest. So it's just an indication that we need all types of forests. And I would say the same thing where there's a perception even further north in the boreal where clear cutting takes place, that it's deforestation. It's really not. It's still a forest. It's at a different stage of a forest.
Supplemental. Yeah, with regards to that, I've seen some of the so-called secondary growth that you've allowed to come up, especially in our municipality and the Highway 50 on the south side. Norwegian maple, which is an invasive species. You basically took out that whole forest and let the secondary growth come forward. Problem is all the secondary growth is all invasive species, and nothing was done, nothing was replanted, and I understand that there is secondary growth in some cases, but sometimes I think we need a little better management of what you're taking out to what's being replanted. I just like to know what kind of replant, how many acres we've been replanting within the county of Simcoe to what we are taking out. And it doesn't seem to be enough being replanted compared to what's being taken out. So I'm a little concerned. I've heard it before where I've been to some of the areas where the secondary growth that you've done a really good job of doing some replantation, but there's other areas that are not, and I'm concerned that we're putting too much emphasis on just taking and not putting back. Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Through the chair, and I appreciate the comment, and I will fully admit that not every case works perfectly, and we do have our challenges, and they're usually related to invasive species. You're absolutely right, and I know the site specifically that you're referring to, and you're right. We have challenges on that property. We're actually completing. If you stick with us, there will be some additional work down on that property, and some of the others where we have some real significant problems and challenges with reestablishing forest cover. And as I say, it's typically related to some of our more problematic invasive plants. To get some of those types of sites turned around can be very expensive. We've actually been working on that particular property off and on for quite a few years. Really difficult dog strangling vine, Scotch pine, Norway maple on that site, Manitoba maple. You're right. Really difficult circumstances, but we do continue to work on it. And I do agree with you. We need to, just from a future budgeting standpoint, I am looking at proposing an increase to our tending budgets to be able to address some of those situations. But in the overall picture, I would suggest they're more rare than not, but there are problem sites that do present quite a challenge. I won't disagree.
As long as it's quick, Councillor Meadows, very quickly.
Yeah, just with regards to that, do you know on average, or can you give me a number of sites that we have that are in that problematic area?
Mr. Davis? And if you have further questions, Councillor Meadows, you can take it offline with Mr. Davis.
Through the chair, I would hesitate to give you a number right now, and it would be impossible to give you a clear answer, but it would be more in the neighborhood of 5%, maybe 10%.
Thank you. I had two quick questions, if I could, Mr. Davis. One is south versus north. There does seem to be an inadequate supply of county forests in South Simcoe, and is that going to be addressed in the 10-year update?
Thank you for the question. That's a good one. Through the 10-year update, not really. I would point out, however, We have been doing some work, and I will be back to council looking for some feedback on that very question, because, you know, what we have done from an acquisition standpoint, if we continue focusing on adding on to existing properties, and that's a really important thing to do because size matters, those corridors matter, but if we continue to do that, what we do is we add more forest cover where we already have it. Now, there's also a reason why there's much more forest cover where it exists today, because those were the worst, you know, if we understand the history of the county forest, we understand where the worst soil conditions were a century ago in those very, very, it literally were wastelands, blow sand. So that's where the focus has been on those larger forest blocks. And then we also have to look at land values. And if you look at the south part of the county, much different land base, much better agricultural conditions in a lot of cases, and the opportunities have just not been there historically. So there's a reason for it. If we're going to focus on it, it would require probably more investment much more investment on a per acre basis than would be the case in other areas. So those are some interesting questions, and I hope to be back to council with looking for some feedback on that in the future.
Thank you. That's fair, Mr. Davis. And then my last question, if memory serves me, that MNRF has traditionally been not in the forestry business with the land they own and not particularly caring for their land. And we had knocked on their door before and asked, could we either acquire it or could we manage it for them? And the answer was no. I wonder if now might be the opportunity to ask again.
Another great question, Madam Chair, and I should probably leave that to our CAO to answer, because he's been at a lot of those meetings over the years. I'm not sure that there's been a concerted effort in the last number of years. It's possible we could look at having some conversations. I can only tell you there have been many meetings over the last 20 years to talk about that situation and how we might offer some value and partnership and that type of thing, and fairly concrete proposals. There was always interest, well, not always interest, but generally there was at different levels, but unfortunately no traction. So whether there's an effort to restart those discussions, I'd be more than happy to take part in that. So.
Thank you. Through you, CO Aiken, so maybe an opportunity at AMO. We do have a friendly minister in that portfolio right now that it might be a good opportunity. CO Aiken?
Yeah, through the chair, I would agree. This is something we did talk about. There's 4,000 acres there that are very strategic and aligned with some of our county forests, and we did make attempts to either purchase or enter into a management contract to make sure the health of the Copeland Forest and other provincially owned forests was maintained. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps now is a good time to circle back, so we can consider that with our AMO delegations.
Thank you. Great discussion. So now we've got the 4 items in the consent agenda on the floor. Is there anyone who would want to pull anything? I'm sorry. Who are you pointing to? Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. So just with respect to that last point about us either inquiring about purchase or an agreement to manage the forest, I'm assuming that would all be at the MECP's cost, correct?
Sorry, go ahead, CEO Aiken.
It all depends, I think, on the arrangement. Obviously, as you saw through the report, that there is some revenues to be gained through managing. But I think, as the forester pointed out, we're more interested in the health of that particular piece of property and how it might impact our adjacent properties. So I think if we entered into a management agreement, it would certainly ensure that we are whole, if not garnering some revenue from that effort.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm glad to hear that, because as someone else had mentioned, the MECP's forests are in pretty rough shape. And we want to make sure that if we're going to do that by the end of by the time the game's over in the bottom of the ninth, that we are whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe it'd be under the jurisdiction of Municipal Natural Resources and Forestry, which is the Honourable Minister Smith. Another Mr. Smith? Thank you. Okay, so we've got anyone want to pull any of the items on here? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder, please, that the following consent items, having been given much consideration, be received? Councillor McDonald and Councillor Cabral, all those in favour? Opposed? That is carried. Next is item 13.1, a request for exemption to remove woodlands under Forest Conservation Bylaw 6894. Any comments or questions on this motion before Councillor Meadows?
Yeah, I was just curious. Reading the report, it stated that part of this is in the Niagara Escarpment protected area. Is that correct?
Mr. Davis?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? That's moved by Councillor Measures and seconded by Councillor Van Stravern, sorry. All those in favor? That is carried. Next is item 14, and 14.1 is Solid Waste Management Strategy Update. Questions or comments? Councillor Walker.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I was quick on the vote.
Okay, thank you. I've got a mover. Any questions, comments, amendments put forward on this strategy update? Seeing none, that's moved by Councillor Walker and seconded by Councillor LaRose. All those in favor? Any opposed? I think that's the quickest we've ever dealt with a waste management item in the last many, many years. And I would ask if there's any other matters for consideration in corporate. Seeing none, I'll turn it back to you, Warden.
Thank you, Chair. And is there any other in performance management? Then I won't bother turning the chair back. So then what we'll do now is there a need to go in camera? Everybody's seen the report. Does somebody want to go in camera and discuss it? If not, then I will just move on to the motion. That direction in camera regarding confidential item CCW 2023-141 dated May 23, 2023 regarding a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land be approved and voted upon in accordance with section 239(6)B of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended. Moved by Councillor Smith, Brian Smith, second by Councillor Fowler. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And I'll look for a motion to adjourn the May 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Committee of the Whole at 11:48. Moved by Councillor Norris, second by Councillor McDonald. All in favor? That is carried. I believe there is lunch provided. Is it there yet, John? So why don't we have a break for lunch and then return in at, what's a good time? 12:30. We'll come back in and start.